the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
According to this new survey by Talker Research, most Americans are actually drinking a lot of their sugar. Something to keep in mind next time you go to buy groceries, maybe. This poll of 2,000 Americans says we, on average, consume 99 grams of sugar every day. That's about twice the amount recommended by the American Heart Association. And that's despite the fact that 85% of consumers say they're actively trying to cut down on sugar.
It's the Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
That was Fox 59 in Indy. Survey that showed Americans consume an insane amount of sugar. How does the number 80 pounds sound? As you heard in that piece, 99 grams a day. And to put it in perspective, that's more than double the American Heart Association's recommendation for adults. But you might think, how bad can sugar be? Well, it wreaks havoc on your body. For starters, sugar is highly addictive. And I'm going to talk to Dr. Sean O'Mara about this. Studies show that when you consume sugar, it just lights up the same areas of the brain as drugs like cocaine. So think about that. We're talking about a very legal substance that hooks you and to keep coming back. The average person can only hold out, they say, when it comes to these sugar cravings, 13 minutes before giving in. I find that hard to believe. I think if I can hold out 13 minutes, I've won the battle, right? Maybe because I don't hold out 13 minutes, sometimes. But, you also have a lot of hidden sugars. It's not just the candy. It's not soda. I don't drink soda. Really don't eat candy. But sugar's packed in other things. You get it in bread and sauces and yogurt and foods that you would not expect. So if you're trying to cut back, you might be surprised where you're getting it. Let's talk about it today with Dr. Sean O'Mara. He's an executive health physician. He's in private practice right now in Minneapolis. And Doctor, good to have you back.
Hey, Drew. Great to be back, and another winning topic to discuss today. So awesome to be here.
Well, I'll be honest with you. The number surprised me. 80 pounds seems staggering. Imagine putting 80 pounds in front of you on a table and thinking you're going to consume that across the year. I bet that number does not surprise you.
No, it doesn't. It really is ubiquitously just an enormous problem for the average person today. And it's insidious how sugar gets into our diets. And it's very complicated. There's many contributors, but it's everything from, the big food industry driven by profit because sugary tasting food is a lot more profitable. The profit margins are just enormously higher than food that's healthy for you, like simple meat. Those profit margins in those snacky, sweet tasting foods are enormous. So you get the food industry, and you also have, unfortunately, the health industry. A lot of the health industry, unfortunately, is incentivized to not speak loudly against sugar because it's helping to feed the market. And so you have that kind of analysis, and everything's data-driven. And when you work for a company, you're driven to, you're obligated to perform in the best interest of a company. So, the bottom line is what oftentimes dictates healthcare. And those corporations do not exist, if you look at those charters, do not exist to improve the health of individuals. It's to maximize the profits. If you really look at it, they're businesses. And so, you need to start understanding the influence that sugar plays in just consumers' lives.
Dr. O'Mara, this is Nick. I remember phone screening for Drew one time. I don't know if you were the guest one time. And the caller said that he worked for a food company that took out the fat from milk and sold skim milk. And he was saying that he regrets that now because he realizes that's just giving so many people a sugar boost when you take out all the fat from the milk.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that call in that situation is, when you start messing with nature, you change the form of things. You eliminate the brilliance of nature. And so when it comes to, milk and other products, there are ratios of fat to protein to carbohydrates that are perfectly set up, for that particular food item. And that's what we see in science. When you start eliminating fat, it becomes a lot more pathogenic, disease-causing. Then you start gaining the type of fat, and there's good fat and bad fat. But most people, just think of fat as all bad. But, if you take away the fat, the healthy fat in milk, you increase the likelihood you put down bad fat and not the the good fats. So you want to pay attention to eating foods in whole form. We call it clean eating. So you can write that down. Clean eating. You want to eat foods in whole form and not processed foods. And when you think about sugary kind of sweet tasting stuff, it's almost always processed unless it's one thing, fruits. Fruit is different because it's not processed. And but boy, the processed food industry really is making a huge contribution, unfortunately, to the condition, the poor health condition of not just Americans, but Homo sapiens across the globe. We see this spreading from Western countries, the United States, to many other countries, traditional countries, even like in Asia, where they've been historically thin, are now facing rising rates of obesity.
Wow.
Because of the dietary change, the nutrition change, and the microbiome that we're spreading through airplanes and cross-culturally, from our species within. So it's penetrating, countries that historically have always been very healthy and lean.
Yeah, Americans tend to be pretty obese, though. I mean, you go to Europe, go to other places. I noticed portion control is a big thing. I was in Italy with an Italian guy, and I looked at his pasta serving. It was very small. He ate pasta every day. And they do a lot of walking, very slim in his physique, right? You take a look at Americans that come over, and their bellies are hanging out over their waist. They can barely fit into their jeans. I mean, whatever it might be. And I know a lot of Europeans used to look at Americans that way, but I think things are now changing in Europe as well, to your point. Is it sugar? Is it carbs? Is it the microbiome that you said is now spreading to other parts of the world? I mean, what's happening globally in terms of weight gain?
Well, it's my favorite term, multifactorial. So it's all those things. It's so many different factors that we call confounding. So you could, declare war on sugar, and you're still going to see pathogenicity, pathogens, disease, and obesity. So there are more things responsible, but sugar is certainly a significant factor and contributor to disease and obesity. And, even before you get obesity, I mean, we talk a lot about obesity because it's so severe. You need to be worried about is just a chubby kid. You really need to. You really need to be worrying about a kid that's getting overweight because it's very likely that is going to continue and worsen. Yeah. And don't coddle it. Don't pretend like, this is not the case. But you see in individuals, once they start gaining weight, that just continues on and it continues to worsen. So we used to be very troubled about people that were overweight because we knew as a species it impacted their quality of life. Now, I saw a video of a poor guy who looked like he just had enormous tumors on his legs because he was so heavy. And that guy was so short of breath just walking 20 feet because he probably was literally carrying 200 pounds of weight in those legs of his. And what a workout. Wow. I mean, if you could scientifically put the amount of work and struggles that poor man in his morbid obesity has to apply just to walk 20 feet, then you try to measure what he's getting out of eating pizza and ice cream and muffins, it's not worth it. I mean, that guy doesn't want to exercise, but here he's working out probably 150 times more than a normal weighted person because of all that extra weight. I mean, people have deluded themselves into reality or understanding reality in their situation when they start to gain weight. So you see yourself gaining weight, you want to turn it around early, nip that problem in the bud in your children, grandchildren, and yourself so that you can stop this progressive pathogenicity of increasing weight and the end stages obesity and morbid obesity.
Well, what makes sugar so addicting? I mean, what's it do to the brain? Why is it as powerful as cocaine?
Yeah. So the studies do, as you pointed out in the beginning of the hour at the show, that it does affect our addiction centers, the areas of our brain where other addictive behavior through functional MRIs light up. So we see this commonality to other forms of addiction, gambling, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs. It affects those same areas. But what I think is more helpful to understand is because oftentimes once we think it's in our head that we kind of dismiss it like, oh, well, it's just part of us. Mm-hmm. Well, even before you get an understanding the addiction centers in the brain, you should understand your collection of microbes inside of your gut, because that's where it first begins, and I call it feeding the bears. And the bears show up where there's tasty food. The only chronic disease you really see in wild bears in the wild are those around national parks and around suburbs where they get near the trash and start eating humans. And so they get more diseased. And so take a cue from what's happening with them and realize that your microbiome, you start feeding the bears, you start eating these tasty, sweet, processed foods. It contributes to the growth of species. The bears start growing in your stomach, in your gastrointestinal tract, and they reproduce every time you take another lick, a little bite of that cookie. And here's the key. You got to recognize when you take a tiny bite of a cookie, you think it's okay because you're, 150, 200-pound human. And you say, what difference is that going to matter? Well, when you've got species of microbes that are microscopic, that's like dumping a football field full of food, on way more than they need. And so that cookie allows them to reproduce. And you know what happens if you're listening to me? You want another bite and another cookie, and pretty soon you've eaten the whole bag or finished the whole carton of ice cream on your own, because these microbes reproduce, and they reproduce in minutes to hours.
Wow.
And so their life cycle is much shorter than ours. So the consequences are much worse, and here's the reason: compounding. Compounding is like debt compounds, and so does profitability. So bankers understand this, and that's how they make companies, more profitable and financial portfolio through compounding. But humans don't apply compounding when it comes to their health and their microbiome. So you want to add good microbes to your gastrointestinal tract, your microbiome, through fermented foods and eating good, healthy foods, sunshine, exercise, walking, using a sauna. These kind of fundamental traditional practices build healthy microbes in your gut. And when you lay on that couch, you don't exercise, you eat ice cream, you eat donuts and good muffins, you contribute to the bad ones. So choose this day who you're going to follow, what kind of microbes you want. It's like Joshua in the Old Testament. You want to create a body that's worthy of the temple of God by making good choices.
You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to the Drew Mariani Show live each weekday at 2 to 5 Central. Thanks for listening.